Dr. Amanda Brooks stared at the quantum readings on her monitor, her coffee growing cold beside the keyboard. The numbers didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. The energy signatures coming from high Earth orbit were unlike anything she ever seen during her 15 years at MIT's Advanced Physics Department. "Professor Thompson," she called out, her voice steady, despite the growing unease in her stomach. "You need to see this." The elderly professor shuffled over, his perpetual scowl deepening, as he studied the readouts. "Impossible," he muttered, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. These energy levels would require. A low rumble cut him off, the kind you feel in your bones before you hear it. The laboratory windows rattled, and the murmur of student voices from the hallway fell silent. Amanda's phone buzzed, emergency alerts from every major observatory around the globe. She didn't need to read them. The sky outside was telling its own story. The morning sun disappeared behind what first looked like storm clouds, but storm clouds didn't move like that. Didn't shimmer with an inner light. Didn't form perfect geometric patterns that defied natural formation. Through the growing darkness, massive shapes descended. Crystal ships that caught what little sunlight remained and refracted it into dazzling, terrible patterns. "My God," Professor Thompson whispered, his scientific skepticism crumbling in the face of the impossible. "They're here." The first transmission came 23 minutes later. Every screen, every phone, every digital display on Earth flickered and changed. The message was in perfect English, yet something about the voice made Amanda's skin crawl. It was too perfect, too precise, like a computer trying to mimic human speech. "People of Earth, we are the hegemony. Your world has been chosen for integration into our empire. Your technology is primitive, your society fragmented, your potential wasted. Submit to our guidance, and you will serve a greater purpose. Resist, and your species will be replaced by more worthy candidates. You have 1 hour to surrender through your world leaders." The next 45 minutes were chaos. Emergency sirens wailed across Cambridge. Students and faculty flooded the streets, some running, others standing in shocked silence. Phones raised to record the crystalline fleet that now dominated the sky. Military jets screamed overhead, looking impossibly small against the alien armada. Amanda found herself in the university's emergency command center, hastily established in the underground level of the physics building. Monitors showed similar scenes playing out across the globe. The United Nations Security Council was in emergency session. For the first time in living memory, there was no debate, no vetoes, no political maneuvering. Humanity's response came with 7 minutes to spare. The UN Secretary General stood before the world's cameras, his voice clear and unwavering. "To the forces that now threaten our world, humanity acknowledges your superior technology. We see your numbers. We understand the choice you have given us, and we categorically reject it. Earth is our home. Freedom is our right. We will not surrender. We will not serve. If you want our world, you will have to fight for every inch of it." The response was immediate. The crystal ships moved with impossible speed, their formation shifting like a single organism. Energy beams lanced down from the sky, targeting military bases and defense installations across the globe. The MIT campus shook as Boston's air defense network engaged the alien forces, anti-aircraft fire, looking like fireflies against the massive crystal vessels. Dr. Brooks, a young graduate student, burst into the command center, out of breath. "The quantum lab, your earlier readings. There's a pattern in the energy signatures. It's not random." Amanda raced back to her laboratory, dodging panicked students in the corridors. Her computer was still running, still recording the strange energy fluctuations from the alien ships. The student was right. There was a pattern, a rhythm almost like. A crystalline beam sliced through the building's upper floors, and the world dissolved into chaos. As emergency lights flashed and evacuation orders blared. Amanda grabbed her external drive. The data had to survive. Something about these energy patterns could be important, if humanity survived long enough to study them. The war for Earth had begun, and the next few hours would determine if humans would face this threat as free people or as slaves. The underground bunker beneath the Pentagon shuddered as another crystal beam strike hit the surface. General Marcus Reynolds watched the tactical display with grim determination as red dots, representing lost military installations, multiplied across the global map. "Sir, we've lost contact with Andrews Air Force Base," a young lieutenant reported, her voice steady despite the news. But the evacuation protocol succeeded. 97% of personnel made it to the subterranean network. Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. The hegemony had expected to find a primitive species, easy to conquer. Instead, they'd found a civilization that had spent decades preparing for the worst. Just not the kind of worst they'd expected. "Status of the underground grid?" he asked, moving to another screen showing the vast network of tunnels and bunkers that honeycombed the Earth beneath major cities. "Cold War infrastructure operating at full capacity, sir. Moscow reports their metro system has been successfully converted to house 50,000 civilians. London's deep-level shelters are active, and Beijing's underground city is already running combat operations." The general nodded, remembering how many times he questioned the maintenance budget for these facilities. Decades of international tension had left them with an unexpected gift. A world beneath the world, ready to hide and protect humanity in its darkest hour. Above ground, the crystalline ships continued their systematic destruction of military targets. But with each passing hour, their strikes found fewer humans to kill. Like a vast tide, the population had slipped away into the Earth, using everything from subway tunnels to old mining complexes. "General," a communications officer called out, "we're getting reports from the surface. The hegemony is landing ground forces, but..." She paused, double-checking her screen. "They're having trouble tracking our people. Their sensors can't penetrate more than 20 feet of solid Earth." Reynolds leaned forward, interest peaked. "Show me." The main screen switched to live footage from Chicago. Crystalline warriors, each standing 9 feet tall, moved through empty streets with mechanical precision. Their armor sparkled with the same light as their ships, beautiful and terrifying. But they were searching empty buildings, their advanced sensors useless against simple dirt and concrete. 3 levels below the abandoned streets, the Chicago resistance was already organizing. Similar scenes played out across the globe. Moscow's Metro Rangers arming civilians, London's underground housing makeshift hospitals, and New York's subway system becoming a military command center. "Sir," the lieutenant called again. Dr. Brooks from MIT made it to the Boston bunker complex. She's requesting emergency communication with all command centers. Said she found something in the enemy's energy signatures. "Put her through to the secured channel," Reynolds ordered. He'd learned long ago that when scientists got that excited during a crisis, you listened. Dr. Brooks' voice came through clear despite being 30 feet underground. "General, the crystalline structure of their ships, it's not just design, it's their actual biology. They're silicon-based life forms, and their technology is an extension of their physical form." "How does this help us, Doctor?" "Their entire civilization is built on perfect crystalline patterns. But Earth's technologies, especially our communication systems, operate on frequencies that could disrupt those patterns. We're not as primitive as they think. We're just different enough to be dangerous to them." Reynolds processed this information as another impact rocked the bunker. Above them, the hegemony continued their systematic destruction of surface infrastructure, unaware that with each passing hour, humanity was growing stronger in the darkness below. "Doctor, I'm giving you access to all available research personnel. Find me a way to use this against them." He turned to his staff. "And get me a secure line to the other command centers. If we're going to strike back, we do it together." In the depths of humanity's underground sanctuaries, hope began to grow. The hegemony had expected to find a primitive species ready for conquest. Instead, they'd found a race that had spent generations preparing for doomsday and had no intention of going quietly into the night. Dr. James Walker's underground laboratory in the Rocky Mountains hummed with activity. Salvaged pieces of crystalline technology lay scattered across reinforced tables, each fragment glowing with a faint inner light. He adjusted his protective goggles, carefully positioning a sonic emitter near the largest shard. "Everyone behind the blast shield," he called out to his team. "Test number 47 beginning in 3, 2. The high-pitched whine of the emitter filled the room. At first, nothing happened, just like the previous 46 tests. Then something changed. A hairline crack appeared in the crystal, spreading like ice on a spring lake. "Cut the power," Dr. Lisa Henderson shouted from her monitoring station. "The resonance patterns are off the charts." The crystal fragment had started to vibrate, its glow intensifying. Before they could react, it shattered into dust, releasing a burst of energy that made the laboratory's lights flicker. "Did everyone see that?" James asked, already rushing to the monitoring equipment. "Please tell me someone got readings on the frequency." Lisa was already pulling up the data. "Got it. It was actually 2 frequencies overlapping. The emitter's output, and..." She paused, double-checking her numbers. "Standard background radio waves." The combination created some kind of destructive resonance. The laboratory's main screen lit up with an incoming transmission. General Reynolds' face appeared, looking more animated than they'd seen him since the invasion began. "Dr. Walker, we're getting reports from ground teams worldwide. Special Forces units using sonic weapons report the enemy forces are showing signs of distress. Tell me you have something." James glanced at the crystalline dust that had once been their test sample. "General, we've just confirmed it. The hegemony's crystalline structure is vulnerable to specific sound frequencies, especially when combined with common radio waves. Their perfect silicon crystal biology has a fatal flaw." "Explain it in terms a soldier can use, Doctor." Lisa steps forward. "Their entire civilization is built on crystal technology because they are crystal technology. But Earth's primitive communications, our radio waves, cell phones, broadcast towers, they're like poison to them. We've been accidentally fighting back since they arrived." The general's expression hardened. "Can we weaponize this?" "Better," James said, already moving to another workstation. "We already have the weapons. Every radio tower, every cell phone transmitter, every broadcasting station. They're all potential weapons. We just need to modify the frequencies." He pulled up a global map showing Earth's communications infrastructure. The hegemony targeted our military bases, but largely ignored civilian communications. They thought our radio technology was too primitive to be a threat. That mistake will cost them. How long to implement this worldwide? Lisa consulted her calculations. The modifications are relatively simple. With the underground network, we can start converting communication centers within hours. But General, she hesitated, once we begin, the enemy will realize what's happening. We'll only get one chance at a coordinated strike. The laboratory's lights dimmed as another battle raged above ground. The crystalline ships were still searching for hidden human forces, unaware that their prey had discovered their greatest weakness. "Make it happen," Reynolds ordered. "I'll coordinate with Global Command. We'll need every underground installation ready to move the moment we launch this counterattack." As the transmission ended, James turned to his team. "Lisa, start writing the modification protocols. Everyone else, we need to test every frequency combination we can think of. When we strike, we need to hit them with everything." He picked up a small crystal shard, watching it shimmer. The hegemony thinks they're perfect, unbeatable. But they've never faced a species that thrived on imperfection, that built an entire civilization on learning from mistakes and adapting. The laboratory burst into activity, scientists and engineers moving with new purpose. Above them, the crystal ships continued their patrol, their crews unaware that every radio wave passing through their perfect forms was already planting the seeds of their destruction. Emily Richardson had spent 15 years fine-tuning sound systems for rock concerts. Now, in the converted basement of Seattle's KEXP radio station, she was about to turn her skills into a weapon of war. "The frequency modulation is all wrong," she muttered, adjusting dials on the modified broadcasting equipment. The captured crystal shard in the testing chamber pulsed with an eerie light. "We're thinking about this like humans. We need to think like sound itself." The underground studio had become a makeshift research station after Dr. Walker's team shared their breakthrough. Radio stations across the globe were now secret weapons development labs, their sound engineers becoming reluctant warriors. "Try this," Emily said, her fingers dancing across the mixing board. She'd noticed something during the last test. The way the crystal responded to certain harmonics reminded her of breaking wine glasses with sound waves. But this was on a much larger scale. The crystal began to vibrate, its surface developing a web of tiny fractures. Behind her, the military observer's radio crackled to life. "Ma'am," the soldier called out. "Command reports similar results from college radio stations in Berkeley and Austin. The lower frequencies are showing the most promise." Emily nodded, already adjusting the bass levels. "It's the resonance pattern. These crystals, they're like giant tuning forks. Hit the right frequency, and they shake themselves apart." Her computer screen displayed live feeds from above ground. The hegemony forces were still searching for human resistance, their crystalline warriors stalking through empty streets, but their movements had become less fluid, more erratic. "They're already feeling it," she realized, studying their behavior. "All our regular broadcasting. It's been affecting them since day one. We just need to find the perfect pitch to shatter their world." The basement door burst open as Sarah Martinez, her former sound tech partner, rushed in with a laptop. You need to see this. I've been monitoring their communications. The interference patterns are incredible." The two women huddled over the computer, watching as waves of standard radio traffic intersected with the aliens' crystal-based communications. Each intersection point created a cascade of disruptions through the enemy network. "Look at that pattern," Emily said, her eyes wide. "It's not just physical damage. We're disrupting their ability to coordinate. Their whole command structure runs on crystal tech, and our primitive radio waves are scrambling it." She turned back to her modified broadcasting equipment, an idea taking shape. "What if we don't just attack their bodies? What if we attack their ability to think?" The next hour was a blur of activity. Emily and Sarah worked together, like they had during countless concert setups, but instead of creating music, they were creating discord. The perfect combination of frequencies that would turn every radio tower into a weapon. "Testing final configuration," Emily announced, her hand hovering over the activation switch. The crystal shard in the chamber had been replaced with a larger piece, salvaged from a downed enemy fighter. The room fell silent as she engaged the modified transmitter. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the crystal began to sing. A high, clear note that made everyone's teeth ache. Fractures appeared, spreading like lightning through its structure. In seconds, the alien technology had crumbled to dust. "Send the specs to command," Emily ordered, already working on the transmission. "Every radio station, every cell tower, every broadcasting system needs these modifications. When we strike, we hit them with everything from college radio to emergency broadcasts." Sarah was already coordinating with other stations through the underground network. Berkeley's ready. Austin's standing by. London's BBC just came online. We're building a global concert of destruction. Emily looked at her modified equipment. The same mixing board she'd used at countless rock shows, now transformed into something that could help save humanity. Above them, the crystal ships continued their patrol, unaware that Earth's airwaves were about to become their greatest nightmare. The hegemony thought our technology was primitive, she said, making one final adjustment. They never understood that sometimes the most powerful weapons are the simplest ones. We're about to give them a concert they'll never forget. Lieutenant Jessica Reeves crouched in the shadows of the Empire State Building's 80th floor, her team of Special Forces operators spread out behind her. Through the broken windows, the crystal ships hung in the air like massive shards of light, their search beams sweeping the darkened streets below. "Command, this is Thunderstrike 1, she whispered into her modified radio. "We're in position. Broadcast array is 2 floors above us. Heavy enemy presence." General Reynolds' voice crackled through her earpiece. "Understood, Lieutenant. Operation Thunderclap commences in 15 minutes. That array must be active when we launch." Jessica checked her watch. 3:45 hours. Across the globe, similar teams were infiltrating broadcasting centers, radio stations, and communications hubs. The largest coordinated strike in human history was about to begin. "Movement," Sergeant Mike Cooper hissed. "Crystal warriors, 3 of them, coming up the emergency stairwell." The team pressed deeper into the shadows. The alien soldiers emerged like walking diamonds, their crystalline forms catching what little light remained. Each stood nearly 9 feet tall, their movements precise and unnaturally smooth. Jessica held her breath as they passed. The modified sonic grenades on her belt could shatter the warriors, but using them now would alert the entire alien fleet. They needed 5 more minutes of stealth. All teams, synchronize final checks. Command broadcast globally. BBC London standing by. Radio Free Europe online. Radio Beijing ready. Operation Thunderclap is go in 10 minutes. The team moved like ghosts through the abandoned office space. Years of urban combat training paid off as they navigated the debris without a sound. The broadcast array was just ahead, one of the most powerful in North America. "Contact," Cooper shouted as a crystal warrior stepped out from behind a collapsed wall. The alien's weapon hummed to life, but Jessica was faster. Her sonic grenade detonated at the warrior's feet, the modified frequency turning its perfect crystal form into a shower of glittering dust. "They know we're here," Jessica growled. "Move, move, move." The team sprinted for the broadcasting center as alarms echoed through the building. More crystal warriors converged on their position, their weapons firing beams of coherent light that turned office furniture to ash. 5 minutes to Thunderclap, Command announced. All stations must be online. Jessica's team reached the broadcast center, securing the perimeter as their tech specialist, Private Sarah Chen, rushed to the controls. Outside, the crystal ships were moving, finally realizing the significance of the building's communications equipment. "Work fast, Chen," Jessica ordered, firing her sonic-modified rifle at approaching warriors. The new frequency caused their crystal forms to crack and shatter, but more kept coming. "Array is charging," Chen reported, modifying broadcast frequency to match specified parameters. 3 minutes to full power. The building shook as a crystal ship fired on the upper floors. The entire structure groaned, decades-old steel protesting the assault. 2 minutes to Thunderclap, Command updated. 90% of global stations reporting ready. Jessica's team had created a defensive perimeter around the broadcast center, their modified weapons taking a heavy toll on the enemy forces. But the crystal ships were moving into position, their weapons charging for a strike that would reduce the Empire State Building to rubble. "Array at full power," Chen shouted over the chaos. "Frequency modulation complete. All global stations. This is command. Reynolds' voice cut through the battle noise. Commence Operation Thunderclap. Now. Jessica felt it before she heard it. A vibration that started in her bones and spread outward. Every broadcasting tower, every radio station, every communications array on Earth activated at once, their modified signals creating a web of destructive resonance. The effect on the hegemony forces was immediate and devastating. Crystal warriors stopped mid-stride, their forms developing spiderweb cracks. The massive ships above began to shudder, their perfect formations breaking apart as they tried to escape the invisible assault. Keep that array online, Jessica ordered as the world around them descended into beautiful chaos. No matter what, keep broadcasting. From her position high above Manhattan, she watched as humanity's primitive technology brought the most advanced civilization in the galaxy to its knees. The symphony of destruction had begun, and there was no stopping it now. Colonel Michael Hawthorne stood in the command center of his modified M1A2 tank, watching the crystalline forces through advanced thermal imaging. The enemy's perfect formations were breaking down, their once flawless movements now stuttering and erratic as Earth's weaponized radio waves tore through their ranks. All battle group leaders, this is Sledgehammer Actual. He broadcast to the assembled armored division, hidden in the underground vehicle bays of Fort Hood. Operation Thunderclap has done its job. Now it's our turn. Commence Operation Iron Rain. The underground hangar doors rumbled open, and 50 modified tanks emerged like thunder. Each vehicle had been retrofitted with sonic emitters, their traditional weapons enhanced with frequency modulators that turned every shell into a crystal-shattering symphony. Enemy forces concentrated in downtown Austin, his tactical officer reported. Their ground units are disorganized, ships attempting to maintain altitude despite structural damage. Perfect, Hawthorne smiled. Battle Group Alpha, take the high ground. Bravo, swing wide, and hit their flanks. Remember your training. Their crystal technology is failing, but they're still dangerous. The tank formation split like a well-oiled machine, years of NATO exercises paying off as they maneuvered through the empty streets. Above them, the crystal ships listed like wounded birds, their once perfect surfaces now webbed with fractures from the continuous radio assault. Contact front. The warning came from Bravo Group. A pack of crystal warriors emerged from a side street, their weapons firing wildly. But their shots went wide, their targeting systems corrupted by the radio interference. Light M up, Hawthorne ordered. The tank's modified weapons roared to life. Each shell released a precise frequency upon impact, turning the once invincible warriors into clouds of sparkling dust. Beneath the Pacific Ocean, another battle was unfolding. Commander Sarah Mitchell's submarine force had remained hidden since the invasion began. Now, they struck from the depths. Sonar contact, multiple crystal ships attempting to land in the water. Her radio crackled. They're trying to escape the radio waves by submerging. Not today, Mitchell responded. All units, execute pattern strike. Their crystalline structure can't handle the pressure changes. Submarines across the Pacific launched specially modified torpedoes. Instead of explosive warheads, they carried sonic pulse generators. The weapons detonated below the descending crystal ships, creating pressure waves that shattered their already weakened forms. Back in Austin, Hawthorne's forces had the enemy surrounded. The tank formation had executed a perfect pincer movement, trapping the remaining crystal warriors in the downtown area. The sonic emitters on each tank created an overlapping field of destructive frequencies. Sir, his tactical officer called out. Enemy ships breaking formation worldwide. Reports coming in from all theaters. They're losing cohesion. Through his viewport, Hawthorne watched as a massive crystal ship lost its battle with gravity. The once magnificent vessel crashed into an empty office building, its structure finally giving way under the combined assault of radio waves and sonic weapons. "All units, push forward," he ordered. "Don't let them regroup. Keep the pressure on." The tanks advanced in perfect formation, their treads crushing the crystal debris that now littered the streets. Each shot from their modified guns found its mark. Years of human military doctrine, proving superior to the hegemony's rigid tactics. "Sledgehammer actual, this is command." General Reynolds' voice cut through the battle chatter. Similar reports coming in from Moscow, Beijing, and London. The enemy's crystal technology is failing globally. Their combat effectiveness is down to 30% and falling. Hawthorne watched as another crystal ship lost altitude, its once perfect surface now resembling cracked glass. The hegemony had arrived expecting to find a primitive species ready for conquest. Instead, they found humanity's full military might, enhanced by the very technology they had dismissed as obsolete. "Push them back to the stars," he ordered, his voice carrying to every tank commander. "Show them why Earth's defenders never relied on perfect technology. We relied on perfect training, perfect coordination, and the ability to adapt." The tanks rolled forward under a rain of falling crystal shards, their advance marking the beginning of humanity's victory over their would-be conquerors. Commander Ashley Cooper watched from the reinforced observation deck of the International Space Station as the impossible unfolded before her eyes. The once perfect formation of crystal ships had dissolved into chaos, their synchronized movements replaced by erratic individual actions. "Ground control, are you seeing this?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "The enemy fleet. They're fighting each other." Through the station's enhanced optics, she could see the crystal ships dividing into distinct groups. Some maintained their attack positions over Earth's cities, while others began retreating to higher orbits. But most surprisingly, a third group was actively opposing their former allies. "Confirmed, Commander," Mission Control responded. "We're detecting multiple frequencies in their communication bands. They're not speaking with one voice anymore." Dr. James Walker's voice joined the channel from his Rocky Mountain facility. "The radio waves haven't just damaged their physical structure. They've disrupted the crystal matrix that maintains their hive mind. For the first time in their history, they're experiencing individual thought." Ashley zoomed in on a particularly intense confrontation. A large crystal ship, its surface already showing signs of radio damage, had positioned itself between Earth and 3 attack vessels, actively shielding the planet from their weapons. "This is beyond anything we expected," Dr. Walker continued. "Their entire civilization was built on perfect unity, perfect obedience. Our primitive technology hasn't just beaten them, it's forcing them to evolve." The space station's sensors picked up a new signal. One of the crystal ships was attempting to communicate, not with its fleet, but with Earth. The translation matrix struggled to process the message, which seemed to come from a single mind rather than the collective. I, the message began, the concept of individual identity clearly foreign to the speaker. I request communication. Understanding required. Why? How are we now many instead of one?" Ashley looked to Mission Control for guidance. After a moment's hesitation, she received authorization to respond. "This is Commander Ashley Cooper of Earth," she transmitted. "We're receiving your message. Can you explain what's happening within your fleet?" The response came faster this time, the crystal being apparently learning to think independently with each passing moment. "The unity is broken. Some still obey the hegemony's purpose. Others question. This has never been. I question." On her screens, Ashley could see more battles erupting among the crystal ships. Those still connected to the hive mind fought with mechanical precision, but the independent ships moved with something new: creativity, unpredictability, individual choice. "General Reynolds," she called to ground command. Request permission to initiate direct dialogue with the questioning ships. This could be our chance to end this war without further destruction. Granted, Reynolds replied, but maintain battle readiness. This could be a new tactic. Ashley turned back to her communication panel. To the independent crystal ships, Earth welcomes dialogue. We never wanted this war. We only wanted the right to remain free, to think for ourselves, the same freedom you're discovering now. The response came from multiple ships now, each message slightly different, each voice distinct. A chorus of newly awakened minds. Freedom causes pain, one transmitted. But also, understanding, another added. We choose to learn, a third declared. Below them, Earth's radio network continued its assault, but now it was precisely targeted, focusing on the ships that still maintained their connection to the hegemony's hive mind. The independent vessels, their crystal structures already permanently altered by exposure to Earth's technologies, were spared. They're not just surrendering, Ashley realized, speaking to all who were listening. They're being reborn. Every radio wave that cracked their perfect crystal structure also cracked the mental chains that bound them to the collective. She watched as more ships broke formation, their movements becoming more fluid, more natural. The hegemony had arrived as conquerors, armed with perfect unity and unshakable purpose. They were learning, through defeat, the power of imperfection, of individual thought, of choice. The battle for Earth had become something more. The birth of a new kind of freedom among the stars. The dawn of humanity's first day of true victory cast long shadows across the National Mall. In Washington, D.C., Dr. Amanda Brooks stood before the gathered world leaders, her research team beside her. As they watched the historical meeting unfold, above them, a crystal ship descended, not with the rigid perfection of their first arrival, but with the gentle grace of a snowflake. Its surface bore the marks of evolution, the once perfect crystal structure now interwoven with patterns that seemed almost organic. The last of the hegemony fleet has retreated beyond the Kuiper Belt, General Reynolds reported, standing at the podium. Those who chose to stay, those who chose freedom, now seek understanding. The crystal ship landed, its transformed surface refracting the morning light in ways that created dancing rainbows across the gathered crowd. A section of the hull became transparent, and the being known as Crystal Speaker Anxith emerged. Unlike the perfect, angular forms of the original invaders, Anxith's crystalline body showed signs of beautiful imperfection. Waves and curves had replaced sharp edges, and within the translucent form, patterns of light pulsed, like a heartbeat. We come not as conquerors now. Anxith's voice resonated, no longer the mechanical perfection of before, but carrying the warmth of individual thought. We come as students of change. Emily Richardson, who had helped transform Earth's radio waves into the key to victory, stepped forward with her modified broadcasting equipment. The frequency modifications are holding, she reported. Their crystal structure has permanently adapted to our radio wave environment. They're not just surviving it now, they're thriving on it. Dr. James Walker added his findings. The integration of carbon-based resonance patterns into their silicon crystal matrix has created something entirely new. They're not just learning to think independently, they're learning to feel. Anxith moved among the humans, its form casting prismatic light patterns that seemed to dance with joy. We were born of perfect unity, of singular purpose. We sought to bring that perfection to all worlds. But you taught us the power of beautiful chaos, of individual choice, of growth through change. The world leaders listened as Anxith explained how Earth's primitive technology had awakened something long dormant in their species, the capacity for individual thought, for emotion, for evolution. The very weapons that had cracked their perfect crystal structure had also cracked open their minds. And now, General Reynolds addressed the gathering. We move forward not as enemies, not as conquerors and conquered, but as teachers and students, each learning from the other. Colonel Michael Hawthorne, his tank division now parked in perfect formation around the mall, watched as Crystal engineers began sharing their transformed technology. Their once rigid designs now incorporated the very frequencies that had nearly destroyed them, creating hybrid systems that combined the best of both civilizations. Commander Ashley Cooper's voice came through from the space station. The first Joint Earth Crystal Research Station has been approved for construction in lunar orbit. They'll help us reach the stars, while we help them discover their individual souls. Dr. Amanda Brooks looked up at the morning sky, where the remaining crystal ships no longer hung as threats, but as promises of a future no one could have imagined. "We didn't just win a war," she said to those gathered. "We sparked an evolution." Angst's crystal form resonated with the truth of her words. In seeking to perfect others, we were imperfect. In embracing your chaos, we found true growth. The hegemony sought to teach, but Earth became the greatest teacher of all. The morning sun rose higher, its light catching the transformed crystal ships and the buildings of Washington below. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, not with just weapons or technology, but with the very things that made them human: adaptability, creativity, and the strength to find victory not in the destruction of an enemy, but in their transformation into something greater. The war was over. The age of understanding had begun, built on the foundation of humanity's greatest victory, teaching the perfect the beauty of imperfection.